So today Dana White gave his official Mount Rushmore for the UFC and named his top 4 fighters in UFC history. Now this is a funny topic and it gets a lot of fans triggered, but let's listen to what Dana White had to say about his Mount Rushmore, then I'll give my reaction and my thoughts on the situation.
Gotta go with Jon Jones. You have to go with Ronda Rousey. Women would not be fighting in the UFC if it wasn't for her. You would have to put GSP in there. And absolutely positively Conor McGregor. He elevated and changed the game globally. Gotta go.
Now, in my opinion, that's not a bad list really. You know, Jon Jones, Ronda Rousey, GSP and Conor McGregor, that is a pretty solid list. In my opinion, I would choose something different. I would choose different fighters, but let's hear what the fans had to say first, and then I'll give you my official UFC Mount Rushmore. Now, in the comments, one fan said not the worst list, to be honest. Another fan says the glazing never ends for Juice Jones, the picture of Demetrius Johnson next to Jon Jones. Another fan posted this picture of Demetrius Johnson with his 11 titles saying, come on man. Another fan says without Khabib, this list is fraud. Another fan says he declared Khabib as the GOAT, LOL. Another fan says how do you not have DJ, Khabib and other fighters? Another fan says glazing as per usual but overall valid list. If we're talking Rushmore though, I'd put Anderson over Jon. Now in my opinion, I don't think Dana White's list is too bad. You know, Jon Jones, Ronda Rousey, George St. Pierre and Conor McGregor, it is a fair list, and to be honest guys, what we need to remember is Mount Rushmore, it is literally just a figment of our own imagination. There's no right or wrong list. Everybody's got their own list based on preference, and this is my list of what I picked when I posted it the other day. I put Royce Gracie at number 1. I put Royce Gracie because I do believe that he did a lot for the sport. He was officially the first grappler in the UFC. His family literally created the entire promotion and they created the competition, and he was the first official UFC champion. So for that reason, I put Royce Gracie on my Mount Rushmore as number 1. Number 2, Demetrius Johnson. Now, I put Demetrius on because he has the most consecutive title wins in UFC history with 11 consecutive title defenses. Even though he lost the UFC and he did lose to Henry Cejudo in the UFC, I still put him on the UFC Mount Rushmore because his consecutive title defense record has never been beaten. Anderson Silva has 10 consecutive title defenses, Jon Jones has 8, so Demetrius has beaten both of their consecutive title records. So you have to put him on that list. You have to put him on Mount Rushmore alongside Jon Jones and Anderson Silva. The next on my list is Jon Jones. Obviously, he is considered the GOAT. In my opinion, he is the GOAT of the sport today because he has the most consecutive title defenses today in the promotion as an existing active fighter. He also has incredible performances. He has a legitimate record against high-level competition and he's never lost a fight. So for this reason, Jon Jones has to go on that list. Next on my list is Anderson Silva. Again, Anderson has to go on that list because he has the second most consecutive title defenses in UFC history. Also, I have a personal preference for Anderson Silva because Anderson Silva is one of the first fighters I ever watched. Well, he is the first UFC fighter I watched on YouTube. The first time I watched UFC was back in 2003 when one of my friends introduced me to it in his house. He had UFC 3 on cassette tape. I watched that. So Royce Gracie is the first UFC fighter that I saw. But then when I was on YouTube, I used to watch Kimbo Slice's street fights, and then one day one of Anderson Silva's fights popped up on YouTube. I seen this skinny black dude in Burger King shorts kicking shit out of people, knocking people out, and I was blown away by him. So Anderson Silva was the first person, the first UFC fighter I saw on YouTube, and he's the one that got me into the sport really. So for that reason, Anderson Silva has to go on my Mount Rushmore. I can see why other people won't put him on there. Obviously, he has an asterisk next to his name because he tested positive for PEDs, but so has Jon Jones, and so have a shitload of other UFC fighters back in the day before PED testing was even a thing. So I put Anderson Silva on that list for my own personal reasons. I actually posted my list on YouTube the other day and a lot of fans kind of criticized me for not including GSP and Khabib Nurmagomedov. Now, I didn't put GSP on there, again, due to personal preference. I did come up watching UFC back in 2003, but I just wasn't a fan of GSP. I never watched any of his fights. I never followed him. I never really knew much about his career. Obviously, I've watched some of his fights. I've watched his fight with Bisping, Dan Henderson, Nick Diaz. I've watched a few of his fights, but I've never really been a fan of GSP. He's not somebody that comes to mind when you think about the GOATs or the Mount Rushmore, just because he's not somebody that I watched. So for that reason, I didn't put GSP on there. Khabib Nurmagomedov, he was literally next on my list at number 5, but you can only fit 4 on Mount Rushmore, so that's why Khabib wasn't on there. But if you could fit 5 on there, Khabib would be the next fighter I put on there, because I do think Khabib has done a lot for the sport. But with the list that I've got, you can't put Khabib above Demetrius Johnson, you can't put him above John Jones, Anderson Silva, and definitely not above Royce Gracie. The reason Khabib isn't on my Mount Rushmore is just because he falls short. He only has 3 consecutive title defenses. Yes, he has done a lot for the sport. He is a legend in the sport. He brought a lot of eyeballs, a lot of fans, a lot of attention to the sport from the Muslim world and people all around the world. But I do feel in terms of the Mount Rushmore, he didn't do enough in his career. He didn't fight long enough. He didn't have enough title defenses to make it on that list. With that being said, my short list does include Khabib. He was actually number 1 on my short list, but other people on my short list for Mount Rushmore is Jose Aldo. You have to put Jose Aldo on there, the King of Rio. The amount of consecutive title defenses he had in the UFC, he was undefeated for 10 years, absolute legend. He has to go on there. Khabib Nurmagomedov is on there. Daniel Cormier is another one on there, because he is one of the fighters that gave John Jones a run for his money, and he was literally at the top of the heap for years, right under John Jones. Another one on my list is Conor McGregor. Obviously, he brought a lot of eyeballs to the sport. He brought a lot of attention, made a lot of money for the UFC, and he revolutionized the entire fight game. So Conor has to go on there. Diaz brothers, without a question. I would put them on my Mount Rushmore because, again, they did a lot for the sport in terms of eyeballs, and they revolutionized the fight game, and they allowed people just from normal backgrounds and normal working class people to believe in someone, to believe in somebody that acts like them, that speaks like them, that can also fight at the highest level and compete against the best fighters in the world. So I would definitely put the Diaz brothers on there. Ronda Rousey, for obvious reasons, she's the first female fighter to ever compete in MMA, and she did bring women into the sport. She inspired millions of women around the world, so I wouldn't argue with anybody that put Ronda Rousey on the Mount Rushmore. And then finally, Charles Oliveira. Charles Oliveira has to go in there, man. He has one of the longest win streaks in the UFC. I think he has the most submissions in UFC history. Don't quote me on that, but I know he has a lot of fucking wins and a lot of submissions. He is one of the GOATs in my opinion, and he also does deserve to be on Mount Rushmore. But anyway, guys, give me your thoughts in the comments. Who deserves to be on your Mount Rushmore? Give me your thoughts in the comments. Let me know what you think.